Hi there! Today we'll discuss a small introduction on business ID validation. I'm Yannick and I run a studio called Cosmos Collective. Our main focus is the validation of new business IDs. On the slide you'll see some of the clients we worked for, and what ID validation is all about is basically creating spin-offs for larger brands in our context, or testing your own IDs and making sure you de-risk them before you actually take them to market. And as you'll see in this presentation, I'm a huge fan of adding flattering pictures of myself in slides. Let's go. Talking about ID validation, what is ID validation all about? If you look at this slide, you'll basically see the two things that describe my entire career so far, which is on one side growth marketing through experimentation, so running small experiments to test actual things in the market, and on the other side you'll see innovation. And what we noticed in innovation over all these years is basically that innovation cycles often take too long. Mainly larger companies wait super long to take things to market, and they build on their own island without actually testing their things with customers and gathering actual feedback from the market. And that's what we want to change with Cosmos Collective. It's what we call the sweet spot in between growth and innovation. If you look at this slide, it's basically a typical track which we run at Cosmos Collective and which ultimately describes the ID validation cycle. What you'll see is that on one side you have the ID side, which you take through three different stages, being the problem stage, the solution stage, and the market stage. And what we basically do is de-risk the ID through rapid experimentation. The red line you'll see is basically the risk that is decreasing through such a track. The ultimate goal of these tracks is that you actually end up with a validated or an invalidated MVP coming from feedback in the market. Once you got that, you can actually take the ID or the product or service to market and build further on it. In the ICE videos, you'll also see a course on growth marketing, and if you already saw it, you'll probably remember these four things. If not, I'll really recommend you to watch that video as well, because if you talk about experimentation or growth marketing, four things that will always come back are these four. You'll see rapid experimentation and finding out what works and what doesn't work, and make sure that the things that work, that you can scale them as soon as possible to take things to market really fast. Another thing you'll see is that the big campaign ID, mostly used by the large FMCG brands, that it really doesn't exist in growth marketing. What growth marketing basically is you test hundreds or thousand things next to each other, and you'll see what works and you drop what doesn't work. On the other side, you'll see that growth marketing doesn't really work with fixed budget buckets. What growth marketing is all about is testing really small and really tiny experiments and only scaling the things that work. And last but not least, growth is it's very trivial. What you'll see is that a lot of companies only focus on awareness, but growth marketing goes way deeper in the funnel and also focuses on things like retention, activation, and also revenue. So you'll see that growth marketing mainly has a full funnel focus. I promised you flattering pictures, so here we go. And as you'll see, I was already validating stuff before it was actually cool and before it became an agency or a startup thing. A couple of years ago, I launched a subscription service for gin and tonic. You'll say two of my favorite things, gin and tonics, and on the other side, new business models. And what I did was, I told myself, like, should I really launch this ginscription thing, and will there be a market for it? Will people really pay me to curate the perfect gin and tonics for them every month? So what I did was I basically just set up a landing page. I advertised on different target groups, and I told myself if I hit 250 pre-orders, I will actually launch the thing. So it was basically simple validation within the market. So I got actual evidence to launch my thing, and the risk of actually building this product or startup, the risk was much lower than if I didn't did this validation test. So zooming in on ID validation, I always use like a really cool example coming from a movie. And Those of you who are still really young will probably not know the movie Field of Dreams, but it's basically a movie about sports, being baseball, and Kevin Costner, the actor, at one point he gets whispered in his ear by a secret voice that he should build a baseball field, and once he does that, that people will come to the baseball field. But yeah, if you've seen the movie, it's actually the worst advice ever. And what validation is all about is that you only build things if people come. So it's actually the other way around. And if you look at the definition of validation, it's basically a process of gathering evidence and learnings around your business idea. And you do it through experimentation. And the ultimate goal is to gather strong evidence from the market so you de-risk your innovation decisions. So if you have a startup idea or you're already working on one, yeah, it's really important to start from your assumptions and to translate your assumptions into actual experiments where you can gather feedback from your potential customers. And they will tell you, or you can test their behavior so you actually know that they will pay you for your product or service. So if you look at experimentation, it's basically turning assumptions and gut feeling into reality, supported by really hard facts from the market. And why is validation so important? That's basically threefold. If you look at the three main reasons for validation is, yeah, of course, the first one is really important, it's money. By doing ID validation and testing your ID or your solution in market, you really save a lot of money in case it doesn't work. So it's really important. The other side is, yeah, you base your ID, once you take it to market, it will be based on actual hard facts coming from the market. You gather strong evidence and you skip the gut feeling, as we say. And last but not least, yeah, try to test as unbiased as possible. Try to test your idea in the simplest form, but try to test real behavior. So don't ask your mother, will you buy my product or service? No, really test people. Set up, for example, what we call a dry wallet and actually have a buy now button on your landing page and see if people click on the buy now button so you validate the willingness to pay. So that's just one example, of course. So basically, it's all about gathering evidence to make sure that your startup or your spin-off of a larger company won't fail. Because let's be honest, life's too short to build something that no one wants. And this quote is coming from a book, Running Lean. In case you haven't read it yet, I really highly recommend it because it's a breakdown of the entire validation or startup cycle, and it really helps you to bring your ideas to life in a very structured but organic way. And if we look at the three stages of validation, we basically have to ask ourselves three questions. And yeah, if you take a deeper look at it, you'll see the three lenses on this slide. And what you'll see is that validation has three main questions you have to answer during your track. First of all, you have to see, do you have a problem that is worth solving? Is your problem really big enough? And can you find enough people that run into that problem regularly? Secondly, the solution is really important. So you have a real problem. Can you come up with the right solution to that problem? Can you build that solution? Is it technically possible? Is it legally possible? Do you have the resources to build it? All of those questions arise, and it's really important to solve them before you take it to market. And last but not least, of course, your market is really, really important. It's a crucial element. Is your market big enough? Are people willing to pay for your product or service? Etc., etc. It's super crucial. On this slide, you'll see a lot of post-its. So these post-its basically represent experiments you can run around the three lenses of innovation. Desirability, do people want your solution? Viability, can you earn enough money with it and is the market big enough? And the feasibility, can you really build your solution before you take it to market? And do you have the required skills to do so? So answering those three questions is really, really crucial before you hit the market. And how we solve it, and a typical track, how it looks like, we basically create an 8-step process. And what we'll do is, we go from an idea or a problem, we go to a validated MVP, and we only do it in 8 very simple, straightforward steps. The first one being the business model canvas. if you're a student and you're a student entrepreneur, yeah, you basically already heard about the business model canvas. It's a simple canvas where you can draft your idea and make a breakdown of all the things you need to bring your idea to life. And what you'll see is, I just mentioned those three lenses of innovation. You'll see that the business model canvas, it basically has all of those three lenses on it. So it's really important that you come up with all the things needed and linked to your idea, and that you fill it in, and that's the first step to testing your idea. Second step is mapping all your assumptions. What are all the uncertainties that make or break your idea? Again, the three lenses are really important here. If you're a big company, of course, we added the fourth one being adaptability, or how we say it, corporate fit. Of course, it has to match with the rest of your company. And what we do here is, we basically turn those assumptions in an hypothesis, meaning making them testable and measurable. You need to know, how can I make sure that I can take that uncertainty and how can I test it? Once you've done that, you can really link your hypotheses and assumptions to actual experiments. And a quick tip from the pros is really here to build sequences. Make a series of experiments that builds further on each other and that strengthen your evidence. So for example, if you recruit people via a social media campaign to a landing page, ask for their email address, send them a survey, the people that fill in the survey, do a user interview with them, and so on and so on. Always try to strengthen your evidence with one step extra. It's really important. The fourth one is the actual experiment design. We have this great card on this slide where you can really map your experiment, and what's really important, you can already define the success metric. What will make or break your idea? What will make sure that the experiment is validated or not? It's really important to really think through that step. Once you've done that, you always need to feed your experiment. Whatever the experiment is, you need people to be your tester group in that experiment. So we mostly use social media recruitment campaigns for that, and already with a very, very small or tiny ad budget, you can already find a lot of people in your potential target audience to test your idea. Once you've done that, of course, you need to run the experiment, which is, of course, the funniest and the most crucial step in the process. I like it by far the most. And once you've done that, of course, really important, you need to take away your learnings and you need to turn them into actions or decisions. And that's also the last step, step 8. Make an evidence-based decision. So you have data from the market, you spoke to potential customers, and then it's time to make a decision. Will you take your idea to market? Will you kill it? What is the potential? Or maybe you can even pivot and adapt your idea a little bit and make sure that you add some extra layers on it. This slide really, for me, is a great representation of the entire process, starting from the business model, going to your list of hypotheses that make your idea testable, actually test your idea in the market, analyze your results, and in the end, you will have a decrease in your risk of taking your idea to market. And you should see it as a loop. Once you've done that, you can go back to the beginning of the slide, taking another look on your business model canvas and adapting where necessary. But evidence is the key word in this process. And to end with like 4 examples of my favorite experiments and experiments that you see a lot and that will tackle a lot of your ideas or your hypothesis. I basically added 4 examples to the slide. The first one is like really simple. It's a landing page. There are a lot of tools to do so. And as I already told in the beginning, it's the tactic I used for my idea being Ginscription, the subscription service for Gin Tonic. I made a landing page, added a form, and I would see how many people pre-subscribe before I launched this. So the success metric was pretty clear. Second example is a Wizard of Oz, and one of my friends and ex-colleagues, he used this for his startup Gifts by Sir, which was basically an AI feature solution to generate the perfect gift for your friend or your partner, whoever, or a family member, it doesn't matter. And based on a series of questions, this startup would recommend you the perfect gift and allow you to buy it in one click. But of course, to build such a solution, yeah, there are quite a lot of technical requirements, and it's really hard, and it requires quite some budget before you can actually launch it. So what they did, they launched the Wizard of Oz, being they faked it till the fake it till you make it principle. And what they actually did, they ran it through WhatsApp. So a human was behind the scenes answering those questions, asking new questions, and they just wanted to test the actual behavior, being on one side, can we suggest the perfect gift on actual series of questions, and on the other side, will people actually buy the gift if we send them a selection of perfect gifts? Then the other one is the imposter judo, and here you actually use an existing solution like a website or anything else to test your ID. So for example, a good example here, you should really look into that deeper, but it's Zappos, sold to Amazon years after they've done this, and how they validated their ID of an online shoe store is basically by taking pictures of existing shoe stores. So they took pictures of the local shoe stores, and they actually turned them into a website, and once people actually bought those shoes, they went to the store and they bought them and they shipped them to the person that ordered them. So it's a really simple way using existing solutions to actually test if people, in this case, would buy shoes on a website. And then the last one is Dropbox. Dropbox has like a lot of examples and use cases when it comes to experimentation, growth marketing, validation, etc., etc. But if you start Googling Dropbox validation, what you'll see is, yeah, Dropbox is quite a complex solution. Remember, years ago, online storage space was quite hard and expensive to find. They turned it into like something really easy to use. And how they validated it, basically, it was just with an explainer video. So they made a video, the founder of Dropbox did, and he made a video explaining the software with a mock-up. So they didn't actually build it. But once they launched that video and they saw how it was picked up by, yeah, startup media, magazines, etc., etc., yeah, it got immediately got viral, and for them it was, yeah, actual validation, because a lot of people asked like, can we use this? They put themselves on a waiting list, etc. And yeah, it was ultimate validation on like, yeah, we should really build this Dropbox service, being an online storage place. And then to wrap up, I added 3 more resources you should really look into as a student entrepreneur. The first one being Looka.com, and it's basically yeah, a website that can generate a branding for your yeah, startup ID or your fake ID. We create a fake brand. And Looka will use artificial intelligence to generate yeah, a visual identity you can use before you actually hit the market in just a couple of minutes. It's really cool to play with. Then the second one is a landing page builder. It's my favorite and simplest landing page builder, being Cart.co. It takes you like a couple of minutes to build a landing page to test your value proposition. And the third one is Bubble.io. For those who don't know it, it's yeah, it's what we call a no-code tool. So you don't need to be able to write code, but yeah, this tool has all the possibilities, and it allows you to build whatever software you want. There's even a guy who completely rebuilt Twitter without writing a single line of code, and it's yeah, it's not super easy to use, but it's definitely worth 5 minutes of your time to investigate it, and maybe you can test your ID using one of these tools. So I'd say start with one experiment today and yeah, get it done. Good luck.